What if I told you that some of the greatest chocolate bars in history were killed off for the strangest reasons? We're not talking about small brands you've never heard of. I mean massive, fan-favorite creations that should have lasted forever, but instead vanished, sometimes overnight. Some disappeared because of poor sales, others because of bizarre marketing choices, and a few have such mysterious endings that people still argue about the real reason they were pulled from shelves. Today, we're taking a trip back through the forgotten aisles of chocolate history, from the bars that were way ahead of their time to the ones that collapsed under competition, and even the cult favorites that came back only to fail again. This list might leave you frustrated, and maybe even a little hungry. Imagine if Kit Kat had an older cousin who never quite got the fame it deserved. That was the Banjo Bar. Launched in the 1940s, it was a chocolate wafer bar with a rich chocolate filling and a smooth milk coating. Simple, crispy, delicious. Everything a bar needed to succeed. And yet, by 1954, it was gone. So, what happened? Many say the problem wasn't the taste but the branding. Banjo sounded playful but didn't exactly scream chocolate indulgence. In an era where Cadbury and Mars were aggressively marketing luxury and quality, Banjo felt almost cartoonish by comparison. It made a brief comeback in the 1970s, but fans quickly realized it wasn't the same bar. The revival was more like a cheap imitation, and sales fizzled out again. For some, Banjo is the ultimate what-could-have-been bar, tasty enough to compete, but branded badly enough to fail. Would you have preferred the Banjo over a Kit Kat? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to see how many people would swap their favorite for this lost classic. Cadbury's Milk Tray Bar was pure madness in the best way. Instead of picking out individual chocolates from a fancy box, you got all of them melted into one single bar. 14 different fillings packed into one slab of chocolate. Pineapple dessert, lime cordial, marzipan, coconut ice, orange crème. It was like a roulette of flavors with every bite. On paper, it was genius. Why choose one chocolate when you could eat them all at once? But that may have been its downfall. The variety was overwhelming, and not every flavor aged well. Some people loved the lime, others despised it. Marketing experts now say the problem was that you couldn't control your experience. With a box of chocolates, you could avoid the ones you didn't like. With the Milk Tray Bar, you had no choice but to eat it all. By the late 1970s, it was gone. Today, collectors and chocolate historians see it as one of Cadbury's boldest experiments, a bar that was both brilliant and doomed at the same time. And if that sounds wild, the next bar was iconic for a much simpler reason. It didn't just sell chocolate, it sold an entire story. When Fry's launched their Five Boys bar in the early 1900s, it wasn't just another slab of milk chocolate. The packaging itself told a story, a boy's face showing 5 expressions: desperation, pacification, expectation, acclamation, and realization. Basically, it was the original meme. That storytelling alone gave the bar a life beyond taste. It was one of the UK's earliest milk chocolate successes, lasting over 70 years before finally being discontinued in 1976. But Fry's wasn't done experimenting. Enter the Five Center, a dark chocolate bar divided into sections, each with a different fondant filling: orange, raspberry, strawberry, lime, pineapple, and later, coffee or vanilla. The catch? You never knew which flavor you'd bite into. That surprise factor kept people hooked. The mystery made it fun, but it also frustrated some customers. By the 1980s, sales had slowed, and the bar was discontinued. Still, many fans argue that unpredictability was part of its charm, and petitions to bring it back pop up even today. Not every bar needed flashy packaging or mystery flavors, though. Some succeeded simply by being comforting family favorites. Cadbury's Tiffin bar was inspired by an Irish recipe, rich dairy milk chocolate with raisins and crunchy biscuits. It was warm, homely, and beloved for over 3 decades before being discontinued in 1972. Though every so often, Cadbury teases fans by bringing it back for short runs. Then came Weekend, launched in the 1940s. Unlike Milk Tray, which was seen as a luxury box, Weekend was the affordable family version: fruit, nuts, toffee, all wrapped up in simple packaging. It lasted until 1988 before sales dipped. Some argue it wasn't the taste that killed it, but the changing culture of weekends themselves. By the late 80s, families weren't sitting together sharing chocolate boxes as much, and of course, the Golden Cup. Launched in the 1960s, this bar was basically pure indulgence: milk chocolate filled with thick, rich caramel. Fans loved it. Its golden wrapper made it instantly recognizable. But in the 1980s, other caramel brands like Galaxy Caramel and Caramac muscled in, leaving Golden Cup to fade into obscurity. If you could bring back just one of these three, Tiffin, Weekend, or Golden Cup, which would you choose? Let me know in the comments. I want to see which one wins the nostalgia battle. But while these were family favorites, the next wave of bars went to war, quite literally, against some of the biggest names in chocolate. If there was ever a bar designed for battle, it was the Aztec. Cadbury launched it in 1967 with one goal: take down the Mars bar. Like Mars, it had chewy nougat, sticky caramel, and a milk chocolate coating. But where Mars had perfected balance, Aztec struggled. Some said it was too sweet, others said too dry. Marketing campaigns called it the chocolate of the future, but consumers didn't see it that way. By 1978, Aztec was discontinued. It made a small comeback in the 1980s, but sales collapsed again. The lesson? You can't just clone a giant, you need to outdo it. And then came Texan, one of the chewiest bars in chocolate history. Launched in the 1970s, Texan was so tough that biting into it cold was like wrestling with a chocolate-covered brick. Kids loved freezing them in the fridge for an extra challenge. Others left them out in the summer sun to soften into a gooey mess. It was a novelty bar that built its reputation on chewiness. But novelty can't last forever. Texan faded out in the 1980s, although Nestlé brought it back briefly in 2005. Fans rushed to buy it, but once the nostalgia wore off, sales slumped again. In the end, Texan's biggest strength, its chewy gimmick, was also its weakness. And if chewiness wasn't enough, some bars leaned into something far stronger: alcohol. Not every chocolate bar was made for kids. In the 1970s, Cadbury released Old Jamaica, a dark chocolate bar with rum-soaked raisins. It was rich, bittersweet, and had an unmistakable boozy kick. For adults who wanted something sophisticated, it was perfect. But by the 1990s, tastes had shifted. Younger generations weren't into rum-flavored chocolate. Sales dropped, and Old Jamaica disappeared. Every so often, Cadbury brings it back in limited runs, but it never sticks. Around the same time, the Rumba bar hit shelves, another rum-inspired creation, but this one leaned into fondant and chewy caramel. It was softer, sweeter, and easier to eat. But like Old Jamaica, it couldn't survive the decline in alcohol-flavored sweets. By the late 1980s, it was gone. These bars prove one thing: sophistication is risky. If the cultural mood changes, what feels grown up one decade feels outdated the next. But if rum was too adult, some bars went in the opposite direction, so strange or experimental that many people barely remember them at all. Some chocolate bars don't die because they're bad, they just never find their audience. Take the Prize bar, launched in the 1970s. It wasn't a Kit Kat, but it looked like one. 2 wafer bars with a creamy center. It was chunkier, sweeter, and for some people better. But it never became mainstream. By the early 1990s, it was gone, almost unnoticed. The Cabana bar, on the other hand, was unforgettable. Coconut, caramel, and cherry all mixed together under a milk chocolate shell. It was a sugar bomb, loved by kids in the 1980s, but written off as too much by adults. By the early 90s, Cabana vanished. Then there was Spiral, a hollow chocolate bar made in a literal spiral shape. It was futuristic, almost like an edible sculpture. Launched in 1984 in small regions of England, it was a marvel of new production technology. But novelty wears off, and by 2005 it was discontinued. And finally, Pyramid. True to its name, it wasn't a bar at all, but triangular chocolate filled with mint cream. Launched in 1988, later reformatted as a bar in 1991, and gone within a few years. Too niche, too strange, too forgotten. These rare gems are proof that sometimes chocolate makers swing for the fences and miss. But when the 1990s arrived, a new wave of innovation hit, and it created some of the most legendary bars ever made. The 1990s were a golden age of chocolate innovation. Companies were throwing wild ideas at the wall, and some actually stuck, at least for a while. First came Time Out in 1992. Think Kit Kat, but on steroids. Layers of wafer sandwiched between layers of milk chocolate, all wrapped in Cadbury's iconic dairy milk. For a decade, it thrived. But by the late 2000s, wafer fatigue set in. Kit Kat dominated the market, and Time Out was quietly discontinued. Then there was Fuse, maybe the boldest of all. Cadbury fused peanuts, raisins, fudge, and cereal together in a chaotic slab of chocolate. It launched in 1996 and became the fastest-selling bar since Whisper in 1983, and then gone by 2006. Some say Cadbury killed it to focus on dairy milk. Others believe it was too expensive to produce. To this day, fans speculate on why a record-breaking bar was axed so soon. Vice versa was another short-lived experiment. Milk chocolate wrapped in white shells and white chocolate wrapped in milk shells. Simple, fun, delicious. But again, discontinued in 2003. Limited-run revivals failed too. And then came Echo, a chocolate biscuit topped with bubbly cream and covered in both milk and white chocolate. It was light, creamy, and beloved by fans. Petitions to bring it back still circulate online, but Fox's never revived it. Finally, the big secret. A whipped mousse center wrapped in a lattice of milk chocolate. Luxurious, indulgent, and, ironically, too secretive for its own good. Launched in 1995, dead within the same year. Some loved it, others complained that the hollow design meant less chocolate. All right, 90s kids, this one's for you. Which of these bars do you miss the most, and why? Comment below. I want to see which one wins the nostalgia battle. And while the 1990s were wild, not every bar truly disappeared. Some survived, but they weren't the same anymore. Not every chocolate bar truly disappears. Sometimes the name survives, but the recipe, the branding, or even the mascot doesn't. Take the Lion Bar. First launched in 1976, it was a rugged beast of a bar, chocolate-covered wafer layered with caramel and crisp cereal pieces. It wasn't pretty, but that was the point. Lion looked rough, tasted crunchy, and gave you a mix of textures that no other bar had. And while the name still exists today, the recipe has been reformulated so many times that old fans swear it's a shadow of its former self. What we eat now isn't the Lion Bar people grew up with. Then there's Whisper Mint. First appearing in 1995, it seemed like the perfect mix. Aerated milk chocolate with a refreshing layer of mint. It quickly became a fan favorite, but in 2003, Cadbury killed it off. They've revived the Whisper line several times, but Whisper Mint has never returned. Fans still rant about it online, proof that once you take something away, it often becomes even more loved. And finally, the case of Taz versus Freddo. In the early 1990s, Cadbury sold little Taz bars, small, affordable milk chocolates stamped with the Looney Tunes Tasmanian Devil. Kids loved them. But as Looney Tunes waned in popularity, Cadbury swapped Taz for Freddo Frog. Same concept, different character. Today, Freddo is still around, but for those who grew up with Taz, it feels like a stolen childhood memory. These survivors show that even when a brand technically lives on, it can feel like a completely different bar. Sometimes, survival doesn't mean victory. It means compromise. But what does all of this really tell us about chocolate history? Looking back at all these lost chocolates, one thing becomes clear. It's not always about taste. Some bars failed because they were too ahead of their time, like Spiral. Others died because of marketing mistakes, like the Milk Tray bar. A few were victims of changing culture, like Weekend. And then there are the mysteries. Bars like Fuse killed despite being record-breaking hits, leaving fans to wonder if something deeper was going on behind the scenes. Chocolate isn't just food. It's memory, culture, and emotion. That's why people still talk about these discontinued bars decades later. For some, biting into a Texan was about toughness and fun. For others, Fry's 5-center meant surprise and childhood mystery. And for adults, Old Jamaica wasn't just chocolate. It was sophistication in a wrapper. Every discontinued bar is a reminder that taste is never permanent. What's popular today might be gone tomorrow, no matter how much people love it. Companies chase trends, cultures shift, and sometimes the bars that vanish become more legendary than the ones that survive. And maybe that's why nostalgia is so powerful, because even if some of these bars returned, they'd never taste quite the same as we remember. The truth is, the legend often tastes sweeter than the reality. If you could bring back just one discontinued chocolate bar, only one, which would it be and why? Drop your answer in the comments and let's see which forgotten treat comes out on top.